Starting out.
We are on air.
And we are live. We're live. Okay, let's just give them, usually it takes anywhere between 1 to 3 minutes so that people start noticing that we're just
All right.
streaming live. Okay. Okay, and oh, by the way, this session is going to be recorded and it's uploaded to our YouTube channel and our DojoLIVE page. You can always use it for reference, like if you want to share it with people or just go back to it further down the road for whatever reason. You can use a transcript. It's all going to be in there for further use, so that people start noticing that we're just. Yes, right now we're broadcasting live, but it usually takes a few minutes, maybe a couple of minutes or 3 minutes, so that, until people start coming actually into the broadcast or clicking the link to their screen, to the channel, okay, that we have been sharing. But we can still start like officially the let's see, yeah. 3 minutes. Okay. Okay, we can start. Okay, here you go. We are starting to have visitors and viewers to our broadcast. So we really appreciate it. Well, let's just get it officially started. We're here. We're broadcasting live again from our Nearsoft's offices in Mexico City, and today we're going to be hosting Aaron Krayna. Aaron, he's our featured guest speaker for the day, and he's an implementation manager at Iron Mountain, and he's also the owner at bookcontentratings.com. Aaron is going to be talking about something that that I'm sure is going to be of great interest to all you engineers out there. And the topic is asking harder questions in data mining. But since you probably know, a lot of you guys know that since I'm not an engineer, then I got to ask, and there might be some folks out there who are in other areas. I'm going to start asking Aaron. Aaron, first of all, welcome to our broadcast today, to our show.
Thanks,
and absolutely, and it's an honor to have you here. Aaron, what is data mining, by the way, in layman's terms?
There's a lot of definitions that people throw around. The one I use is basically just getting useful information out of whatever data you have. So for banks, that might be transaction data. In my case, it's books. There's basically it's taking what you have and trying to get something different out of it, looking at it in a different way.
So what you do is you go out there, you process or you analyze data from different perspectives, and then you pretty much summarize it into useful information. Is that essentially what it is?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. All right, Aaron. Well, as we have discussed in the past, we're going to be talking about data mining. Asking harder questions. Aaron, why did you think of this perspective or this topic, asking harder questions? Why is asking harder questions important when it comes to data mining? I'm going to pass on the mic to you so you can do your thing. You're the expert. And oh, by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just for 1 second. I would like to remind the audience that if you want to interact with us, you can send us your questions. And you should see, if you're watching us from our YouTube channel, you should see a prompt right on the lower left-hand side of the screen. Just click in there and it'll take you to a prompt where you can send us your questions, okay? And we will read them here and then we will get back to you. And if any of you guys at Nearsoft specifically wish to join us here on camera, we still have 8 seats available. Just let me know on Skype and I'll send you the link so you can join us on the Hangout itself. If not, you can simply send us your questions on the prompt, on the Q&A prompt. Okay? Well, thank you. Now, having said this, I'm going to pass on the mic to Aaron so that he can talk to us about why asking harder questions is important in data mining. Aaron?
Thanks, Carlos. So for me, there's data everywhere. We all have access to address lists, email lists, databases, and we don't really think much about what's actually in them. In my case, I started collecting books, just ebooks, a couple years ago, and started thinking, I bet I could figure out how much violence is in these books, how much strong language is in these books,
Okay.
or sexual content.
Okay.
So the data is there. We just have to look at it in a different way. Hospitals and medical groups do the same thing. They have diagnosis codes saying, which is basically a number that says you have cancer or this person had a heart attack, and they have things saying what they did about it. If you start asking questions of, okay, what treatments work best for hospitals? For me, it's what patterns can I use to find out what is in a book before I read it? So, and there's this kind of information all over the place for you, whether it's codes or error reports or various things you're working on for financial clients. There's all this stuff out there. We just have to try to look at it in a different way. And then we can start finding a lot of value just by having a different perspective.
And okay, thank you, Aaron. As I was listening to you, one of the things that comes to my mind is, for example, we understand that data mining software is one of a number of analytical tools, right, for analyzing data. Now, in terms of tools for this, is there any? Can you point us in the right direction as far as which ones you think are good, which ones don't work, or how what direction we should take in terms of tools in order to analyze the data?
There's a lot of tools out there. I haven't actually used too many of them. I know if you have a major budget, there are some pretty neat ones that will take a big data set and show you all the patterns. For me, I think the most important part is the person looking at the data rather than the tool itself. For me, I actually just use Microsoft Excel for most things, coupled with some basic programming skills on Visual Basic and actually DOS I still use. It's more about the questions that you're thinking of and the person looking at it than the actual tool. So you can do a lot with a simple tool if you just kind of think outside the box.
Okay, and in that case, I think it would be wise, especially for non-technical people, to differentiate or learn how to differentiate between the concepts of data, or the differences between data, information, and knowledge. I mean, these are three separate things. Sometimes some folks out there might be confusing one for the other or misusing one for the other. So what can you tell us, and how can we differentiate data, information, and knowledge?
To me, data is just kind of a collection of facts, whether that be a big database of addresses, collection of books. It's there, but you don't really know anything about it until you start digging in. And then you can start to gather some useful information, like how many engineers live in my town, and therefore can I send sales promotion letters to. That's more useful information. And taking it a step further, knowledge is when you really understand it and make use of it. So instead of just having raw data, now you have something really valuable because you understand it.
Okay. Why did you? Thank you again, Aaron. And I myself, and this ties into what I said at the beginning of this talk, is that I don't have an engineering background per se. So if you tell me if I ask myself, how can I ask harder questions? Well, that's going to be a tough one for me. So why did you decide on the topic of asking harder questions? Why do you think it's relevant or important in data mining?
I think it's helpful for people in various roles. I'm not an engineer. I have no formal technical training.
Hmm.
So my technical skills I really just taught myself over the last 5 years or so, for the most part. Um, so I think being able to look at a problem and try to just look at it from a different angle. That's true whether you're an engineer, an analyst, or somebody in marketing saying, how can I get more people to buy my product? It's still the same thing, trying to just look at the information you have and think, okay, how can I look at this in a different way? How can I get value from this? And it might not be very straightforward, but it's trying to really think outside the box. And that applies to everyone, whether you're an engineer or just a salesman.
And I understand that you also have, and I just thought of it. I just remembered it because you said I'm not an engineer, but one of the things that I do know is that you're also an entrepreneur, right? So,
Yeah.
and this is, tell us a little bit about uh, how has data mining been of use to you in your in this particular endeavor of bookcontentratings.com? Have you? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really the core of what I do at bookcontentratings.com. Um, I've used the years of experience I've gained in project management at Source Corp and at Iron Mountain now,
Hmm.
where I build workflows. So we might take a image that a hospital sends us, uh, assign it to a person to process, do some conversion on it, and then output a certain result. I use basically the same principles on books. So I collect ebooks, and then I convert them into a format that can be analyzed, and then basically do kind of keyword, key phrase analysis to check for things like violence. So engaging, if you stub your toe, that's not very violent. If somebody's killed, that's very violent. So I'm kind of measuring things like that on a large scale, so thousands of books at a time, um, and then turning that into a web page format to post on the website. But the heart of it is really the data mining or analysis portion, which is basically keyword or phrase detection um, to detect violence in language.
Okay. So and that's in the case of bookcontentratings.com, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, another thing that I was looking at your information here, the one that I have on LinkedIn, and we're still within the context of data mining. And how are you implementing it? How are you using it also at Iron Mountain, in the case of Iron Mountain?
I don't actually use it specifically all that much.
Hmm.
I do use some related tools of design,
Hmm.
like working out a systematic design to handle documents or handle large amounts of data. Also, automation. Um,
Okay.
as far as possible at Iron Mountain, try to automate everything I can,
Hmm.
both for myself and for the operations team who will be using my systems. And those same principles I use in bookcontentratings.com as well. Um, there's a lot more we can automate than we often do. Um, and so that ties in of I practice the skills of kind of basic coding, automating basic tasks that are just repetitive and annoying. And I use those principles of automation that I've learned to be able to like analyze 1,000 books at a time instead of having to sit there and read them. So I think automation and getting value out of data kind of go together,
Hmm.
because the more you can automate, the more time you have to think and kind of look at it with different perspectives instead of being bogged down in doing the same thing over and over.
Hmm. Hmm.
So don't exactly use data mining in my work at Iron Mountain, but kind of the principles of efficiency and automation really ties in well.
Okay.
I run my website on my own
Okay.
currently. Eventually, I hope to hire people, but that'll be a long time away.
Okay.
It's not currently making any money. But I run it all on my own. But because it's all automated, I can rate, if I just focus on it, 1,000 books in a week.
Hmm.
I can't read 1,000 books in a week, but with the tools I made, I can do a lot more.
Absolutely. Well, there are some folks that claim to have read that and more per week. I think they're just bluffing. Okay, just going to appear smart. All right. Now, another thing that I wanted to ask you is still on the about specifically data mining is I was wondering, as far as the approach that you would like to follow. For example, when you're analyzing the data, uh, would you are you leaning more towards the statistical side or the machine learning side or neural network side?
Not very familiar with networks. I want to get it to more machine learning,
Mm-hmm.
but frankly, my programming skills aren't there to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of working on a combination of um, using, kind of doing some things manually, and then thinking, okay, how can I apply the way I made that decision
Mm-hmm.
on a larger scale? So if I'm, say, reading a sentence in a book and saying, okay, this sentence is violent, think about why. And then once I know why it's violent, because there's blood or something like that, then I can automate it and apply it on a large scale for data mining and find every single instance in every book that's like that. So it's kind of my approach of thinking, what did I do? Why did I do it? And
Okay.
how can I apply that on a large scale? So it's kind of a more basic form of machine learning, just because I don't have the technical skills, but you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of think through, why did I do this and how can I systematize it?
Okay, I see. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, Aaron, we have a question from the audience. We have a question. Israel Gomez. He's one of the viewers, and his question is, what does the future hold for concepts related to business intelligence and data mining?
Oh, that's a tough question. Making predictions is always dangerous, but I think a lot of people are going to realize they still need people. Um, that there's a lot of tools out there, there's a lot of data out there. When it comes down to it, you need people to decide what matters. You need people to think through, how are we going to turn all this data into something valuable. There are a lot of automated tools out there that can help you find like the really valuable or pieces of data that stand out. And those tools are, I think, going to grow and get more, probably cheaper, easier to use. But at the same time, people are still going to have to make the decisions. They're still going to have to think about what's useful and how to apply it in the real world. So people
Mhm.
aren't going to go away. We'll just have better tools to work with.
Better tools to work with. Okay. Well, that was thank you, and Israel. That's your response. And some people think that data mining is somehow uh, a figure of speech. Would be um, when you're data mining, you're torturing data until it confesses, right? So it's like for some people, it's like that. So I mean, we a lot of information is generated. Sometimes we're aware that we're doing it. Sometimes we're totally unaware of that because we don't know, right? So we realize that we generate information when we I don't know, when we log in our work entry, or when we log into a server to check our email, when we pay with a credit card or something. So, and my question is, what is the purpose of generating so much information, and how does it get in the way of accuracy?
I think we collect too much information a lot of times.
Uh-huh.
You know, say Twitter, there are billions of tweets out there. And
Right.
there's also, say, company email systems or just various things. We're just collecting massive amounts of data and
Mm-hmm.
not doing anything with it. And I think there is a lot of confusion around the terms data mining. You hear about data scientists,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. I think all it really is analysis, just with the new name and maybe a bigger set of data.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes down to it, data mining is just looking at the information you have to try to find something useful. Um, it gets maybe more complex in when you write a really good algorithm for understanding your data. All you're really doing is plain old analysis, maybe a bit better. I think that's all it's really meant by data mining or data science. It's just trying to look at your data in better ways. Not much fancier than analysis, you might say.
You said you used a keyword or a very important word, better ways. What would be a better way to look at it?
Some of the tools I've seen, I can't remember the name of it right now. It'll take like millions of records of, say, people who have had different kinds of cancer and show you what patterns lead to recovery and what patterns don't. That's really useful data because hospitals can use that to save lives. So that is a much better way of looking at information. And that's a tool, a systematic approach. There's also the more personal side of looking at something and saying, you know what, I'm pretty sure I can get something out of this information that might have not been what it was originally intended for. Books are originally intended for reading. But if you look at them a different way, you can, on a large scale, find what kind of content's in them. So it's really just an extension of the same thing. Better tools, but you still have to have people to ask good questions and to think about things in new ways. Different perspective can change things quite a bit.
Okay. All right. We're still with the topic of asking harder questions in data mining. And I would like to remind the audience to encourage the audience to send us your questions by means of the prompt, or you'll always send us a tweet on Twitter and also on our Facebook page. So if you're listening, just where you can go to ask questions besides the prompt. Okay. We're still, again, topic asking harder questions. So I'm wondering, I'm trying to challenge you in a way. I'm trying to find a way to challenge you as a non-engineer to ask you a hard question pertaining to data mining. And one of the things, one of the questions that I was thinking of is, how can I say this? Please bear with me because I'm wording my thoughts, okay? Okay. When we're asking harder questions is, I mean, to me, data mining is a humongous world, a humongous environment that sometimes I have a hard time understanding. So one of the things that I wonder, as from the non-technical standpoint, is what kind of technological infrastructure is required for this. Okay, so in terms of that, what would your response be to that? What kind of technological infrastructure is required for better data mining, as you mentioned earlier?
I haven't gotten into too much of the infrastructure question. So I really can't answer that. What I use is, again, I don't have a whole lot of thorough technical skills, but I've kind of pieced it together based on, again, Microsoft Excel and Windows DOS commands to kind of simulate a SQL database.
Okay.
So yeah, I kind of cobbled my own together, but really a database and a spreadsheet, if you're just talking basics, for somebody really starting out, just get Microsoft Excel, some information in your spreadsheet, and use pivot tables. Pivot tables come with Microsoft Excel by default, and it's kind of a beginner's way to look at your data in different ways. You can, say you're looking at transactions by date for a bookstore or wherever.
Okay.
You can just use a pivot table to filter that data by week, by day, by month, by category. And it's all really easy right in Microsoft Excel. So if you're starting out, just toy around with that and it'll kind of make you think differently. And it's a basic tool. It's almost everybody has it. And
yes.
If we're going more advanced, certainly there's much better solutions out there. I haven't used many of them just because I haven't needed to. At my level of scale, I can handle everything just on my laptop. Has enough processing power to handle probably 300,000 books.
Oh,
so I'm not there yet. So eventually I have to scale, but I think there's a lot that can be done just with the tools we have available. As companies start scaling, yeah, they're going to have to buy SQL databases. They're going to have to buy Oracle. products, and start working with more database administrators, people like that. But I think the average person can learn quite a lot just from tinkering around with the spreadsheet and pivot tables.
Okay, so definitely the more the data being processed and maintained, the more powerful the system required. So that's yeah, that's a logical conclusion. Now, and what about the query complexity? For example, would you say that the more complex the queries, the greater the number of queries being processed? So how is that going to affect the tools that you're using? You mentioned Excel spreadsheet, which is fairly straightforward. Is it going to affect you somehow?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I have to run my stuff on a solid state drive because it was taking 15 minutes to open my programs, even with 7,000 books. Eventually, I'm going to have to scale. Excel does not work very well when you're running complex analysis. It just takes a while to run. When you start getting more advanced, more complex, you're going to need better systems, databases, and also more specialized IT resources. I don't have the SQL skills to translate what I've done into a SQL database. So as you get more advanced, larger, you need to hire database administrator, specialists in those areas. I haven't gotten to that scale yet, but I'm going to eventually.
Okay.
But still, I'm working with probably a couple 100 million lines of data just on a laptop, and I haven't spent $600 on equipment and software. I think people can get a long way in kind of working with what they have before they need to invest $5 million in a big data center.
Okay.
Now, of course, depending on what you're doing, if you're a hospital group trying to figure out how to cure cancer, you're going to need a big infrastructure. But for most of us, small businesses, you can do a lot with what you have.
Yeah, simply a relational database storage, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, definitely. Okay.
MySQL is free. MySQL, it's free online, free SQL database, so that can give people a good start. There's a lot out there that's free or cheap and works really well.
Absolutely. Aaron, we have another question by the audience, by Eddie Lozada. He's asking, I'm just going to read the question back to you. He says, as a self-taught data mining professional, which resources would you recommend to programmers eager to learn about this topic? Any book or website? That's Eddie's question.
Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you, Eddie.
I often end up just using Stack Overflow or Stack Exchange, which are places people just ask questions and other people answer them. I think the best way to learn is to go try to build something and work through all of the little problems along the way. Prior to doing my current website, I had done one called countypopulation.com, which is no longer in existence. Really just as an experiment of how to work with large sets of data, how to do some basic analysis. So my suggestion, more than any particular book or website, is give yourself a project, something that's kind of challenging, but you think you can do, and just try to work on it, build it. Maybe it's a hobby website, maybe it's a little program for your own purposes, but just try to do something, and you'll figure out that there's all these problems along the way, and you can just use Google to figure out what the solution is, how to fix the code. But just try to do something, and I think you'll learn a whole lot more by doing that than from any particular book. Though of course, there's plenty of good books out there. I haven't really read any of them, but so that formal education has its place. But just go do something, build something, and I think you'll learn a lot more from that.
Well, there you go, Eddie. Thank you, Aaron, again. And once again, if anybody else in the audience has a question, you know what to do. Aaron, what's the difference between data mining and web mining?
Probably a different source. I don't think I've really heard web mining specifically, but web mining is probably more just going through collecting data from the web and using it either for analysis or to say collect email addresses. Either way, it's still probably a similar goal of finding useful information from what you have. Different source. Web mining is probably more crawling the internet to collect information as opposed to scanning a database, something like that. That's my take on it. Same, various goals, but really just a different source of data.
Okay.
When it comes down to it, you're still trying to say what useful information is here, regardless of what the source is.
Okay. Considering the fact, Aaron, that a lot of now I would like to focus just a little bit to narrow down our view to our people here at Nearsoft. We have all of my teammates, my co-workers here at Nearsoft. They're software engineers, very talented. They're working with a number of programming languages, ranging from .NET, Java, Python, you name it. So there's a whole bunch of them out there. From that perspective, what would you, and from that, with that consideration, and from your perspective, in the context that we're talking about, what kind of questions, hard questions, would you advise them to ask about data mining, specifically to engineers?
I think it depends on your industry. I'm assuming you work with a lot of probably finance or healthcare or other kinds of businesses, right?
Yeah, healthcare, barcode traceability. So yeah, travel.
Okay. Travel. Okay. It's kind of a tough one because you don't necessarily have the opportunity when you're working on the guts of some software program to really get into data mining. But even let's say with a healthcare client, there's a lot of value that you can add if you have access to the data, or if you can track information. Say as you're creating a workflow for a healthcare client, tracking what kinds of medical claims fail, why they fail, which can help say what are medical providers doing wrong where they're sending their claim forms. What things are causing your system to fail because doctors aren't doing it right. If you can track that information, set up your programs to be able to track that information, then tell your client, hey, your doctors are doing this wrong and it's costing you $1 million a year for us to fix it. You might want to reach out to them and say, hey, you should fill out this form right. So those kinds of things. Just think about what causes you problems. What causes your medical client problems? There's things you can do, just even in that sense of saying, why are we having these problems? What problems occur most often? And how can we fix them? So I think there's applications there of just exception handling. And that's stuff we deal with every day in software development.
Okay. When is the right, I was thinking, what's the right time to migrate migrate or to integrate several various databases into data warehouse?
Probably sooner than later. When you have a lot of data in a lot of places, it's really hard to combine them. Whereas if from the start you can keep your data consolidated in one place as far as possible, it's going to be a lot easier. I've seen this a lot with finance or medical companies. It'll have like a petabyte of data in one database under Oracle and another petabyte under Microsoft SQL servers. How are they going to get those two to talk? It's really hard. If they'd done it when they had 2 gigabytes and just combined them then, would have been a lot easier. So I think thinking about it sooner than later really helps. Just to consolidate it now or as early as possible before you have so much invested in it that it's just overwhelming.
Okay. Yeah. And that's, I think it's going to be a little bit the changes that we're going to see in that regard. It's going to be a little bit dramatic because I think that data analysis software is allowing users to access this data freely. So, and it ties into what we were talking about, the type of tools that we were using that you, for example, you mentioned like something very simple like an Excel spreadsheet and such, and then when the time comes to migrate or to escalate into a tool with greater power, and in terms of the timeline for that, in the there's an expression for that, and it's the arrow time. Okay, so it's like the timeline for that. Is it going to be a short one? Is it going to be a long one? And how is it going to happen? The way I see it is, again, from the non-technical standpoint, it's going to be very, very dramatic. But I might be underestimating uh, its the level of drama that is we're going to be witnessing in terms of changes, the changes that are required to accommodate the requirements in data management. So what do you say? What's your take on that? How dramatic is it going to be? All these changes that we're going to be witnessing in the near future.
I think it's going to be very interesting. I've heard that data, I don't remember the exact numbers, maybe doubling every year, every other year, something like that.
Uh-huh.
So companies are having to deal with way, way more data than they ever did in the past. Well, what they're all going to do about it, I'm not too sure, or whether it's going to cloud services or
Uh-huh.
one thing that I've heard our company Iron Mountain talking about is, maybe you don't need to keep all that information.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things you can just archive. We do a lot of box storage. We do a lot of scanning, but not everything needs to be digitized. Not everything needs to be kept in your database forever. So to some extent, as we're dealing with a massive amounts of growth of data, we also need to think about what's really relevant. What do we really need to keep forever? Sometimes you can avoid some of those problems of scale by just not keeping everything. But you do want to think about what you don't save, because you might be losing some good stuff there. As for like a small business trying to scale, thinking about when do I need to upgrade my hardware, it partly depends on what kind of IT infrastructure you have and what your budget is. Because if you're going to buy an Oracle database, it's about $1 million.
Mm.
Most small businesses don't have $1 million to invest in IT unless they're either skyrocketing or have capital venture investments, or venture capitalist investments. For me, I think the growth path, once I get past my laptop, would be probably using like Amazon Web Services, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Starts out very affordable and can scale indefinitely. Of course, it depends on what you need and confidentiality. If you're handling private medical records, you might not be allowed to use a web service like that. But for other companies, I think it's a great way to scale. It's affordable. You don't have to make a massive capital investment. You just use what you need and add more and more and more without having to ever do a massive upfront capital expenditure. So I think that's probably going to be a lot of the ways that small businesses grow their infrastructures with those. Google provides it, Amazon provides it, Microsoft does. So there's a bunch of providers out there, and I think it's a good option. It's probably what I intend to do when I need to.
Okay, thank you again, Aaron. Okay, once again, we're approaching the final stage of this talk. So again, I'd like to remind the audience to send us your questions. Now's the time, and I'd like to focus on my final questions to Aaron, because and I was remembering pretty much what we talked about earlier, and I asked you earlier about your approach with whether it would be in analysis and data analysis, whether it would be statistical or machine learning or neural networks, all those things. So depending on your approach, how and when do you define or decide whether what kind of relationship you're going to be seeking? Like, for example, classes, clusters, associations, or maybe sequential patterns. So how do you decide on which relationship are you going to be seeking?
That goes past my real experience with data mining. I've kind of taken a kind of not very technical approach that
Mm-hmm.
is more about kind of automation and the human element. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with native Bayes analysis and neural networks. I'm not very familiar with it simply because I haven't needed to get into it to get what I need.
Okay, I see.
So I can get all the information I need from books, really just with Microsoft Excel and DOS commands.
Yeah.
It's basically a DOS command that says find this string inside of this file, and it gives you your result. So everything I need to analyze millions of books is right there in Windows and Microsoft Excel. So you don't always need the advanced tools. Sometimes they're awesome. I intend to use them eventually to kind of improve accuracy. But for now, it's just, I can find the information I need with what I have. And that's, it takes some human interaction, trying to think through what makes a sentence violent, what is sexual content, what is strong language. But then, I don't know, I think there's a lot that can be done without getting into the really advanced analysis. But at the same time, it has its place. Again, using the cancer example, if you want to cure cancer, you should hire a data scientist.
Yeah, absolutely.
And same with financial institutions. They're looking for patterns of fraud. You could, with just basic tools, probably figure out what some fraud looks like. Like if I bought a laptop in Hawaii and a cup of coffee in Oregon within 5 minutes. I was probably not in both places at the same time, so one of those is fraudulent. But there's a lot more complex things that you would need the more advanced tools for. Sometimes the answer isn't that hard or doesn't require that advanced of a tool to figure out. But they have their places, certainly.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Let's see. Okay, Aaron. We're about to wrap up the session. So what I would like to ask from you is to simply, if you have a piece of a pointer, a piece of advice, or something you would like to share with our audience, whether present or future audience, please, I would encourage you to share with us some final words so we can wrap up today's broadcast.
Yeah, just for everyone out there, I'd say the best way to learn, in my experience, is just to try to go do something. And if you have a hobby you're interested or software you like, maybe try to build a piece of software, try to build a website, or even try volunteering, depending on what you're interested in. And I think you can learn a lot by doing. So it might be things you're interested in. Just try to get started. Try to do something. Volunteer, do something for free. You learn a lot by doing, and there's a lot of value in that. So if you have an idea, go for it.
Okay, there you go. Well, Aaron, once again, I would like to thank you for having agreed to be here with us today. And I want to thank your audience for their questions as well. And you and I are going to be in touch because we need to send you some tokens of appreciation, as I mentioned at the beginning. So again, Aaron, we really appreciate it. Thank you for being a part of this. And on behalf of myself and everyone here at Nearsoft, I really appreciate it. And let's be in touch.
Thank you, Carlos. I appreciated the invitation. Glad
okay. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.